75,000 years ago, a volcano erupted in what is now the island of Sumatra, Indonesia. Not the kind of eruption you have seen footage of. Not the kind that closes airports and makes the news for a week. Something so far beyond that scale that the word volcano barely applies to it. The Toba eruption was the largest volcanic event in the last 2 million years. It released 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash and debris into the atmosphere. To put that into a number that means something, the 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption, the one that flattened 230 square miles of forest and killed 57 people and shocked the entire world, released 1 cubic kilometer. Toba released 2,800 times that amount in a single event. The ash cloud that followed covered the entire Indian subcontinent in a layer estimated at up to 15 feet deep. It reached as far west as Africa and as far east as the South China Sea. Sulfur dioxide was injected into the stratosphere in quantities so massive that it triggered what scientists call a volcanic winter. The sun was blocked. Temperatures dropped. Some estimates place the global cooling at 10 to 15 degrees Celsius sustained over years. Not days, not months, years. Think about what that means. The plants died first, then the animals that ate the plants, then the animals that ate those animals. The food chain did not bend. It collapsed, and somewhere in the middle of all of this, there were humans. In 1998, a geneticist named Stanley Ambrose proposed something that the scientific community found deeply uncomfortable. He looked at the genetic diversity of modern humans and noticed something that should not be there, or rather something that should be there but isn't. Every species carries within its DNA a record of its population history. When a species has been numerous and stable for a long period, its genetic diversity is wide. When a species has been nearly wiped out, when the population crashes to a tiny number of survivors and then recovers from that tiny pool, the genetic diversity narrows. The crash leaves a fingerprint. Humans have almost no genetic diversity. We are, genetically speaking, one of the least diverse large mammals on the planet. Chimpanzees, despite being far fewer in number than us, carry significantly more genetic variation than all 8 billion humans alive today. The genetic data points to one conclusion. At some point in the not very distant past, the human population crashed to a number so small that almost all of our variation was lost with the people who carried it. Ambrose looked at the timing. The genetic bottleneck in human DNA dates to approximately 70,000 to 75,000 years ago. The Toba eruption was approximately 74,000 years ago. The overlap is not a coincidence. It is the fingerprint. His theory, known as the Toba catastrophe theory, proposes that the eruption and the volcanic winter that followed reduced the global human population to somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. Some estimates go lower, perhaps as few as a single breeding population of a few hundred people in a sheltered location in Africa. Every person alive on Earth today, all 8 billion of us, would descend from that group. Your entire family tree, no matter how far back you trace it, no matter what continent your ancestors came from, converges on a handful of people huddled somewhere in Africa during the longest winter the world had seen in tens of thousands of years. Now here's the part that should stop you. Those people did not know they were the last ones. They had no way of knowing that every other human community, every group on every other piece of land had gone silent. They were not survivors in the way we use that word today, people who knew there was a disaster and made it through. They were just people, trying to stay warm, trying to keep their children alive through a winter that would not end. They had no agriculture, no stored food, no understanding of what a volcano was or what had caused the sky to go dark. They had fire and tools and each other, and somehow that was enough for years, possibly for a decade or more. They held on, and because they held on, you exist. But here's what makes the Toba story genuinely strange. It is not settled science. The Toba catastrophe theory remains one of the most debated proposals in human evolutionary biology. Not because the eruption is in doubt. The eruption happened. The scale of it is documented in ash deposits across 3 continents. What is debated is whether it actually caused the bottleneck. Archaeological evidence from South Africa and India has complicated the picture. Sites have been found where human tool use appears to continue through the Toba ash layer without interruption, suggesting that in some locations at least, human populations survived with less disruption than the catastrophe theory implies. Some researchers argue the bottleneck happened earlier for different reasons. Others argue the genetic evidence has been misread. What everyone agrees on is this: the eruption happened, the genetic bottleneck happened, the timing is remarkable, and the question of what actually reduced our ancestors to the edge of extinction has not been fully answered. There is something in that uncertainty that is more unsettling than a clean answer would be. Because if the catastrophe theory is correct, then the survival of our species was not inevitable. It was not guaranteed by our intelligence or our tools or our adaptability. It came down to geography. A small group of people happened to be in a place where the ash was thinner and the temperatures dropped slightly less and enough food survived to sustain them through the winter. A few degrees of temperature difference, a slightly different location, and the story ends there. No civilization civilizations, no history, no language written down, no record of any of it, because there would be no one left to write it and no one left to read it. The Cretaceous extinction that killed the dinosaurs is famous because it ended something enormous and alien to us. The Toba event almost ended something that would have looked, if you could have seen them huddled around their fire, almost exactly like us. And the strangest part is this: they made it, against every odd, through the dark and the cold and the silence where other human voices used to be. They kept going. And tens of thousands of years later, one of their descendants is sitting somewhere listening to this. The volcano left a scar in the earth the size of a lake. It left a scar in our DNA that every human being on the planet carries to this day, and almost none of us know it is there.